This demonstration is how to copy a pair of flat-fronted trousers. This is a men's pair of trousers, but the technique would be the same for ladies. I've chosen a pinstripe so that we can use the stripe of the trouser as an aid to understand grain lines. You can see at the hem, I shall move it into the camera shot, so that you can see at the hem that the pinstripes are at right angles going up the leg. So they're at right angles at the front, and they're also at right angles at the back. So if ever you have a hem that is sitting at an angle, there's something wrong with your pattern. So our trousers are pressed so that they're easy to work with. And I've chosen to work with the left leg that has the fly stitching. For the demonstration purposes, I've used some draping tape to go up the inside leg just to make the seam more visible. You would be able to see that yourself and wouldn't find that necessary. Okay, so when we lay our trouser out to pin it down onto our paper, we need to make sure that we're keeping the trouser leg really nice and flat. Now the front leg is smaller than the back leg, so I find the easiest way to work with my trouser is to have the outside leg folded on the seam line, allowing the side seam to be seen easily from the top, and the back leg is just rolling round onto the inside leg. Because we know that the stripe is working at right angles to the hem, I'm actually going to draw a line and line my trouser leg up to it. When you start to copy your trouser, you need to make sure that you've laid it out really nice and flat. It's important that you keep your fold at the side seam on the seam line and allow the extra from the back leg to roll forward onto the front. This is possible up to about the mid-thigh of a trouser, and then above that the back starts to roll round onto the front for the outside leg. So for the purposes of demonstration, I've used a draping tape up the inside leg seam. This is only to make it more visible. You wouldn't need this to copy a pair of trousers. You would be able to see the seam quite clearly. Now, because I've used a pinstripe to make it clear about the grain line on a trouser and to demonstrate that the hem is at right angles to the grain line, I can draw a straight line for the hem and then line my trouser up to it, and that will be my starting position. And then making sure that the trouser is nice and flat coming through this position. I will pin the trouser down. So I'm pinning through paper into a cardboard that I have taped to my table. This allows the pin to anchor through the paper into the card and stay nice and stable. The card doesn't protect your table because the pin is going through the card, so this must only be done on a proper pattern cutting table so that you don't spoil your furniture. Okay, so now I have the lower leg positioned and supported with my pins. I'm going to draw around the outside edge. Now the seam line is nice and clear here because I've used the draping tape, but you would be able to see the seam anyway. So I'm going to take my tracing wheel and I'm going to push through that line, and that will show me where my front and back legs connect. Here I have a marker, and this is because the back leg of a trouser is slightly stretched onto the front leg, and I'm making a marker that I will go through with my tracing wheel that will help me know where I want to start that stretching from. This line here is above the knee, so I'm now flattening out the thigh area of the trouser. I'm keeping rows of pins so that I keep the trouser straight, because you don't want wrinkles. You need to try and keep your trouser as smooth as possible. Now the area around the crotch is harder to get to lay flat because you've got two pieces coming together on a curve, and it's a more three-dimensional shape. Okay, so when we're laying out the back of the trouser, we need to make sure that we've got it really nice and flat and feeling inside that there are no wrinkles around the back crotch seam. For the demonstration, I've gone over the seam with a fabric pencil just to make it clearer. You wouldn't need this copying a pair of trousers for yourself unless you find it easier to see that way. I'm laying out flat. I've come parallel to the dart. Now all trousers, both men's and women's, need a back dart to allow for the curve of the bottom. So I'm pinning this out nice and flat. I'm now laying the front out flat because we'll copy the front first. Okay, so directly under the crotch, I've pinned the opposite leg out of the way to keep the crotch line really nice and smooth, coming through from the front across into the back. This area around the crotch and the fly is too thick for the tracing wheel, so we'll need to use an awl. Because it's a curve, I'm pushing through about every 5 millimeters. Now there's an area of the back upper body that's rolling round onto the front. I'm marking this with the draping tape so that you can see for this demonstration. And the first part of this is still quite thick, so I'm going through with the awl, and then I will be able to go through with the tracing wheel. Our pocket details. I'm going to trace through the pocket shape, but in my first toiles I only draw my pockets on. I don't make the pocket, because I need to know that my trouser fits perfectly and that there are no distortions that are being allowed by the pocket opening up if my model is bigger than my trouser. So if there's no pocket there, we know we have a perfect fit. I'm just going to draw around the outside of the legs again so that I've got all of my information. Okay, one last quick check all the way around to make sure that there's nothing that I've missed. Now I'm going to transfer the shape of the fly stitching onto my copy as well, so that I can see the length of the zip and the shape of the fly. You can remove some of the pins so that you're able to open the trouser and start working to the inside. Okay, I'm going to go with the tracing wheel down the centre back. I'm going to tracing wheel through the dart and across the end of the dart as well, so I can tell where the dart finished. And then coming further around the crotch of the trouser with my tracing wheel, because it's only single layer, so I can get in, and I'm following it. Now I can't get all the way down, so I'm going to lift the garment up and follow the line from the other side. And I can see that it lines up with the tracing wheel line. So now that we've copied the centre back area, is that we can take out some of the pins. Just checking. We need to wheel through the waistline. Okay, always check that you have all the information you need and that it's come through clearly before you remove the piece. So we need to allow the dart to pivot to the position where the outside leg wants to sit. This will make the dart naturally open so we can see how much was in the dart. So the area directly below the end of the dart needs to be secured. We can then allow the garment to lay flat the other side of the dart to the point where our side seam is laying flat. So we can mark where our side seam is reaching, and we can, with our tracing wheel, Mark the waist and mark the other side of the dart. Lift our garment to see what we have, and we can see that we've got our dart. And our back waistline finishes in this position here, because now the dart has been allowed to open. The extra is added to the side leg. We can take the pins out and gently roll the trouser back, checking our information. Okay, now then, I can see that I'd forgotten to use the tracing wheel to show the inside leg of the upper thigh. So I can roll my trouser back into position because everything is still secure. Got my lines to follow from my outside leg. And I can pin that area back into position, lining it up with the areas that have been drawn around, and then tracing wheel down the inside leg of the upper thigh. I'm going to do a little balance marker here close to the crotch. Okay, so I'm checking my pattern before I lift my trouser off completely. I'm looking for the line that is the centre front line, and I'm following those markers. Because I did them with an awl, the texture of the line is slightly different, so it does make it easier to spot. And the back line was done with a tracing wheel. So I'm following my markers. So I'm lifting my trouser up and I'm checking the parts. I've drawn over the pencil lines of the front crotch and the back rise. And we're just gently marking the pocket. So I will undo each row of pins and check the leg as I work my way down the trouser. Okay, so we're lifting our pins. Okay, so we've now marked our front and back trouser. Is our outside leg. I'm just looking to see what the shape is. It appears to come in towards the knee and then out slightly towards the hem. The inside leg falls straighter towards the knee and then carries on, becoming fuller to the upper thigh. So I'm going to straighten that line up. Yeah, it has meant that I've added a little extra here, but it's more likely that that was straight than would just be sinking in at that position, having been wider here and wider there. Whereas for the outside leg, there is a possibility that it was swinging outwards to be how the trouser would sit onto the shoe. So we don't want wobbly lines. We want nice crisp lines. And I'm drawing in the front leg. Okay, the dotted line is the fold line. So we know that there's twice as much fabric. So the distance between here and here, we need to add that distance again to the opposite side. So we go along every now and again and add an equal amount. When there's more of a curve, we need to do our measurement more often. Wait a second. So when I'm lining the markers up, I can see that these three matched. This one didn't, but it was better for me to follow the average line. I can see here I've made a mistake because it doesn't line up, and there's no way that I would want my trouser leg to scoop in there. So I'm double checking my marker. 2.3, I went the wrong side of the 2 centimetre line. So you've got to check your work as you're going along. If something doesn't look as though you're going to get a smooth, even line, double check your measurements. So when we're looking at our back rise, where it would meet the waistband, this should finish at a right angle. Our pattern doesn't. We had two choices. We would either take a right angle from the point where we finished, or we would take a right angle to the position of where it lined up with where we know the back waistband finished. I would choose the longer measurement and add the extra to the back rise. This would give me an accurate shape, and when I try my toile on my model or the stand, I would be able to see if I thought my back rise was too high and make my adjustment then. So our back trouser leg comes to this position, so we are just going to line that up and smooth it in as quickly as possible to the outside leg. Okay, so that our work is nice and clear, if we mark our front leg line with one colour highlighter and our back leg with a different colour, when we're tracing the pieces off to create our pattern, it's less confusing.
Yes, I just do so.
So I'm marking the areas of the back rise that I was able to mark. The area in this section, we won't know the accurate shape until we've done the next stage. You can tell in areas where the side seams are the same for the back and the front, because you would see through the broken lines, you would see both green and pink, so you would know that that seam line belonged to both the back and the front. and where they separate from these positions, you can see that the seam line is either only for the front or only for the back. So I'm now going to trace a copy of the back trouser leg. It's nice and clear to see because I know that I'm following the green lines. I can't be distracted by the pink lines of the front panels. What I am going to do is I'm going to put some balance notches in so that when I check the two pieces together that I'll know that they match. So I'm marking the balance notches at the positions where both the back and front share the same line. Okay, so I now have a copy of my back leg. I'm able to check from the notch position upwards whether my two pieces match each other. There's a very slight difference, so I will be making an adjustment to make sure that they both fit. Now, for the inside leg, I'm going to do another balance notch lower down. I'm lining my pattern pieces up, stitch line onto stitch line, following the curve. When we've checked our inside back leg against our inside front leg, this is the position that we finish at. But our back leg needs to be slightly shorter than our front leg for the top 2/3 of the thigh above the knee. So we have a notch at this position, it's an approximation. If you think of 2/3 of the leg above the knee, you need a notch in around this area. And between this position and the crotch, the back leg is about 5 or 6 millimeters shorter than the front leg. This is to reduce the crease that occurs underneath the bottom. So I'm going to move this marker line down 5 millimeters to here. I'm going to mark that with my green highlighter to make it nice and clear so that I don't get confused. I'm now going to lay my two crotch areas back together and draw a nice smooth line. So I also have an additional notch. I do a notch about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres from the finished crotch. And I put this on the back and the front trouser leg. This makes sure that this stretch is actually done accurately between the two notches, and that I don't find that when I've stitched my toile that I've just not matched my back and front legs up correctly and have some extra fabric at the end. My notches wouldn't match if that happened, and I would be able to double check my work. We can see that the front on the outside leg finished a few millimeters higher. I'm going to fold the dart out and check my back waistline. You can see that this has created quite an exaggerated dip, which I don't want. So I am going to add this extra on. And create a smoother shape. When I'm copying a garment, I find it helpful that when I find small discrepancies, I would always recommend that you go to the larger measurement, because it is easier to make an adjustment on either the model or your mannequin if something is slightly bigger than it is if it is slightly smaller. So now we have our back trouser leg and our front trouser leg. We can create these two pattern pieces and add seam allowance and then make our first toile.